She woke up early that morning feeling the usual mix of tiredness and determination. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were quiet, except for the distant sound of a car passing by. She had been working at the small restaurant for several years, and despite the long hours and the often thankless work, she always tried to put a smile on her face. The customers had their own problems, their own worries, but she always believed that a little kindness could make their day better. It wasn't just about serving food. It was about listening, noticing, and helping where she could. She went through her morning routine mechanically, as she had done hundreds of times before. Breakfast was quick, a cup of coffee, and a small sandwich she had packed the night before. She glanced at the clock and felt the familiar nervous flutter in her stomach. Work awaited her, and she knew it would be another long day filled with chaos, complaints, and endless orders. But she didn't mind. She liked being busy. It made her feel useful. When she arrived at the restaurant, the smell of fresh bread and brewed coffee greeted her. It was comforting, almost like a second home. She exchanged greetings with the staff, a few words with the regulars who had already started their mornings, and then started her shift. The day began like any other, serving tables, taking orders, and trying to keep a smile on her face, even when the kitchen was behind and customers were impatient. By midday, the restaurant was full. The lunch rush was always the hardest part of the day, and today was no different. She moved quickly, balancing trays of food, answering questions, and making sure that everyone felt attended to. A customer complimented her on the way she handled a difficult situation with a fussy diner, and for a moment, she felt proud. It was these small moments that kept her going, the recognition that her efforts mattered, even if only to a few. But as the day went on, an uneasy feeling started to settle in her chest. There was a tension in the air, a quiet that didn't belong. Her manager seemed distracted, moving around the restaurant with a serious look, whispering to the kitchen staff. She tried to ignore it, focusing on her tables, but the feeling grew stronger. Something was about to happen. She could feel it, though she didn't know what. The moment came suddenly. Her manager called her to the back office, closing the door behind them. The air felt heavy, and her stomach sank as she saw the serious expression on his face. He didn't waste time with small talk. "We don't need you here anymore," he said. The words hit her like a physical blow. She blinked, trying to process them. I don't understand," she stammered. "I've been working here for years. I've never had a complaint. Why now?" Her manager didn't answer. There was no explanation, no apology. Just a short, cold sentence that left her reeling. She felt a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. Years of hard work, loyalty, and late nights had been dismissed in a moment. She wanted to argue, to make him see the unfairness, but the words wouldn't come. She felt powerless, as if the ground had been pulled out from beneath her. She left the office quietly, holding back tears. The staff watched her go, some with sympathetic looks, but no one said anything. She didn't want to talk to anyone. She just wanted to be alone, to walk away from the place that had been such a big part of her life, now reduced to a memory she didn't want to hold. The streets outside seemed darker, colder than usual, as if the world itself was acknowledging her pain. As she walked home, her mind raced. Rent was due, bills were piling up, and she had no idea how she would manage. She thought about the dreams she had put on hold while working long hours, the plans she had made for a better future, and the sense of security that had been ripped away. It was more than just losing a job. It was losing a piece of herself, her identity tied to her work, her pride, and her independence. The city moved around her, people going about their own lives, unaware of the storm inside her. She passed shops and cafes, their cheerful signs a sharp contrast to the heaviness she felt. She tried to focus on each step, to breathe through the panic, but it was difficult. Every corner reminded her of a memory. Every sound seemed louder, sharper. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and alone. She paused at a streetlight, looking at the passing cars and thinking about what her next move should be. She considered calling a friend, but she didn't want to burden anyone with her problems. Pride and fear held her back. She had to face this alone, as she always had. The thought made her chest tighten. She had faced challenges before, small ones, manageable ones, but nothing like this. Nothing that made the world feel so uncertain. Her thoughts drifted to the restaurant, to the people she had helped, the moments she had shared with customers and colleagues. She had tried to be kind in small ways, noticing when someone needed encouragement or a listening ear. She had stayed late to make sure a regular customer was okay, bought a meal for someone who couldn't pay, comforted a child who had dropped their ice cream. She had done these things quietly, without expectation, without anyone noticing. And now all of that felt meaningless. The walk continued, her steps slow, each one heavy with the weight of disappointment and fear. She passed by familiar streets, places she had walked countless times, but today they felt different. The buildings seemed taller, the people more distant, and the shadows longer. The city had not changed, but she had. She felt like an outsider in her own life, displaced by circumstances beyond her control. As the sun began to set, the streets grew darker, the city lights flickering on one by one. She pulled her coat tighter around her, not just against the cold, but against the emptiness she felt inside. She tried to imagine a future, a plan, anything to give her hope, but the darkness seemed to swallow her thoughts. She felt small, insignificant, like a tiny figure lost in a vast, uncaring world. Yet, despite the fear, there was a spark inside her that refused to go out. She had survived difficult times before, and she could survive this too. She reminded herself of the strength she had shown in the past, the resilience that had carried her through long nights and hard days. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and continued walking. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew she had to keep moving. The city was quiet now, the noise of the day replaced by the soft hum of traffic and the occasional footsteps of late-night wanderers. She walked with purpose, even if that purpose was simply to reach home safely. Her mind wandered, thinking about options, possibilities, the small steps she could take to regain control over her life. She didn't have all the answers, but she had determination, and that was a start. As she turned a corner, she noticed the first hint of something unusual. A flash of light reflected off a car, a sound that didn't belong to the normal hum of traffic. She glanced around, curious but wary, feeling a flicker of unease. The day had been full of surprises, none of them good, and now, at the end of her walk, another one seemed to be waiting. She couldn't have imagined what was coming next, how her life would shift in a way that was both terrifying and extraordinary. But in that moment, she was unaware of the change that was about to sweep into her life. The way fate had a strange way of testing people and then rewarding them in ways they could never anticipate. And so, she walked on, each step carrying the weight of the day, each breath a mixture of fear and hope, unaware that the events that evening would mark the beginning of something completely unexpected, something that would change her life forever. As she continued walking, the evening air grew colder, brushing against her skin like a quiet warning. Her thoughts were heavy, a storm of worry and fear swirling in her mind. She thought about her future, about bills that needed to be paid, and about the way the restaurant had treated her. She had given her loyalty, her effort, her time, and now it felt as if all of it had vanished overnight. Each step she took felt heavier than the last, her feet dragging slightly on the uneven pavement. The city around her seemed distant, almost unreal, a blur of lights and shadows that could not comfort her. She had just passed a small park, its benches empty and the playground quiet, when she first heard it. A deep, rumbling sound, low at first, then growing steadily louder. She stopped mid-step, her ears straining to catch the source. At first, she thought it was a truck, perhaps driving down a side street, but the sound didn't match the usual city traffic. It was closer, more precise, almost deliberate. Her pulse quickened. Something felt unusual, out of place. Then she saw it. A sleek black car appeared from the distance, moving with a smoothness that made it look almost unreal. Its engine purred like a wild animal, confident and commanding. She took a step back, a knot forming in her stomach. Her heart raced as more cars emerged, each one shining under the dim streetlights, their presence dominating the quiet street. 5 cars in total, lined up perfectly as if arranged for a show, their engines creating a chorus of low roars. Her mind raced. Why were they here? Who could they be looking for at this hour on this quiet street? The cars slowly drew closer, stopping in a semicircle around her. She felt trapped, her options shrinking by the second. The doors of the cars opened, one by one, and men stepped out, all dressed sharply, their expressions serious, almost intimidating. The moment they all stood before her, the world seemed to pause. Time slowed, the hum of the city fading into the background. The air felt thick, heavy with tension. One of the men stepped forward, his presence commanding, and asked in a loud voice, "Where's the waitress?" She froze, her eyes wide with shock. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of the words. Were they talking about her? Did they know her name? Her instincts screamed at her to run, but fear rooted her to the spot. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and overwhelmed. The men's gaze was intense, scanning her face as if seeking confirmation. Yet she couldn't find a single word to respond. Her chest tightened, and she swallowed hard, trying to calm herself. The cars around her seemed impossibly large now, their shiny exteriors reflecting the streetlights like silent sentinels. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her, making it difficult to breathe. She thought about screaming, calling for help, but even that seemed pointless. The street was quiet, almost deserted, as if the city itself had stepped back to watch this moment unfold. The man who had spoken moved closer, his eyes locking onto hers. There was no malice, but there was a quiet authority that made her heart race. She could see that these were not ordinary men. They carried themselves with a confidence that spoke of power, of influence, of lives lived in a realm far beyond her own. Yet beneath that, there was curiosity, a search for something she could not yet understand. She tried to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what you mean," she said, her words trembling. The man raised an eyebrow, his expression unchanging, and repeated the question, this time softer but still firm. "The waitress. Are you the one?" She shook her head slowly, trying to comprehend what was happening. Her life had been turned upside down already today, but this was something entirely different. The streets, the cars, the men. It was like stepping into another world, one she had never imagined existing. And yet, despite her fear, there was a strange pull, a curiosity she could not deny. Something about their presence suggested that this encounter was not random, that there was a reason she was here at this exact moment. The men exchanged glances, and she noticed that one of them reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. He handed it to her, and she took it cautiously, her hands shaking. The card was simple, yet elegant, bearing a name she did not recognize and a message that read, "Meet us tonight. We have something important to discuss." Confusion mingled with fear in her mind. Who were these people? Why were they looking for her? And how did they even know her? She felt the weight of the day pressing down even more heavily now, a mix of exhaustion, disbelief, and uncertainty. She had walked home expecting a quiet evening to nurse her wounds and perhaps plan her next steps. But instead, she had been thrust into a situation she could neither understand nor predict. The men seemed to sense her hesitation. One of them spoke gently, almost kindly, instructing her not to be afraid. They explained that she had caught someone's attention in a way that was rare and meaningful, that her actions, though small and unnoticed by many, had made a difference. She listened, still trying to process each word. Her heart raced, not just from fear but from the strange recognition that perhaps her life was about to take a turn she had never anticipated. As the conversation continued, she learned that a man she had once helped at the restaurant had spoken highly of her to his family. A simple act of kindness, a meal she had given without expectation, had not gone unnoticed. It was incredible to her that something so small could ripple out in ways she had never imagined. Her fear began to mix with disbelief and wonder. Could it really be that someone from a completely different world, a world of wealth and power, had taken note of her? That her actions had mattered in ways she had never considered? The men gave her time to collect her thoughts, allowing her to process the shock and uncertainty. She began to see them not just as intimidating strangers, but as individuals who had come seeking something specific, something tied to her character, her choices, and the quiet integrity she had carried through her work and her life. The realization was overwhelming, and she felt a strange sense of hope, fragile but real. They asked her to follow them, to meet someone important that evening. She hesitated, the weight of her fear and exhaustion pressing against her. But deep inside, she knew that this could not be ignored. This was an opportunity mysterious and unexpected, but perhaps the first chance she had to turn the day around. She agreed, nodding slowly, her voice still trembling but determined. They guided her to one of the cars, and as she stepped in, the leather seats and quiet luxury felt alien yet oddly comforting. The ride through the city was surreal. She watched the lights blur past, the familiar streets transforming into a new world she had only glimpsed from the outside. The men spoke softly among themselves, their conversation purposeful but not unkind. She felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and curiosity coursing through her. The day had been the worst of her life, filled with loss and uncertainty. Yet now, in the most unexpected way, it held the promise of something extraordinary. As the cars moved in unison through the quiet streets, she couldn't help but think about the journey that had brought her here. The long years of work, the small acts of kindness, the moments she had spent caring for others without expectation. They had all led to this point. She realized that life had a strange way of balancing hardship with opportunity, that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the largest impact. By the time they arrived at their destination, her heart had settled into a rhythm of cautious anticipation. She stepped out of the car, taking in the grandeur of the building before her, the sense of power and influence that radiated from every corner. She felt small, yet not insignificant. Something about this moment felt monumental, as if it was the turning point she had been waiting for, though she had no idea what awaited her inside. The men escorted her through the entrance, and she felt the air shift around her. The world she had known, the one filled with daily struggles and quiet efforts, was fading away, replaced by a new reality, one that demanded courage, openness, and trust. She walked forward, each step bringing her closer to the unknown, yet also closer to the possibility of a life she had never imagined. And in that moment, she understood that even in the darkest of days, something extraordinary could emerge, often when least expected, often in ways that challenged everything she thought she knew about her life and herself. She stepped into the grand lobby, her eyes wide as they adjusted to the bright lights and polished floors. Everything seemed so large, so impressive, so completely unlike the small streets and restaurants she had known all her life. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest, not just from the walk she had taken earlier, but from the sense that this moment was extraordinary and perhaps life-changing. She tried to steady her breath, to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her, but it was nearly impossible. Fear, curiosity, excitement, and disbelief all battled for attention, each stronger than the last. The men who had guided her exchanged quiet words, then turned to her. One spoke gently, explaining that she had caught the attention of someone very important, someone whose opinion carried weight far beyond her imagination. She blinked, trying to understand. Important? Someone cared enough to search for her, to send these men to find her? She had only been herself, only done small acts of kindness without thinking of recognition. And now the universe had noticed. They led her through long hallways, each decorated with expensive artwork and sculptures. She tried not to look too amazed, but it was impossible. She had never seen anything like this. The air smelled of faint polish and something floral, subtle and calming, but it only heightened the feeling that she was stepping into another world. She walked quietly, following their instructions, feeling the weight of the moment pressing against her shoulders. Finally, they stopped before a large door. One of the men gave her a reassuring nod and opened it. Inside was a room that radiated calm authority. A man sat behind a massive desk, his posture upright, his eyes kind but sharp. He looked directly at her, studying her face as if trying to understand every detail, every line of experience. He was not intimidating, but there was a sense of power about him, the kind that did not need to be announced. She felt both small and recognized at the same time. He spoke, his voice calm and deliberate. "I have heard about you. I have heard how you helped someone when no one else would. How you gave without asking for anything in return. That kind of character is rare." She felt her throat tighten. It was strange hearing praise from someone she barely knew, from someone in a world so different from hers. She wanted to nod, to speak, but her voice felt trapped. I only did what I thought was right," she managed to whisper. He smiled slightly, understanding. "Yes, and that is why you were found. Small acts, unnoticed by many, can echo further than we imagine. You helped someone who needed it most, and that action has led to this moment." Her mind raced. She remembered the elderly man who had come to the restaurant weeks ago, the one who had seemed tired and alone. She had stayed past closing time to serve him, making sure he had enough to eat. She had even paid for his meal herself when she realized he couldn't cover the cost. She had never told anyone. She hadn't expected recognition, because it wasn't about recognition. It had been about doing what was right. And now, it seemed, the universe had taken notice in a way she could never have imagined. The man behind the desk continued. "My father spoke of you. He told me about the kindness you showed him when he was in need. He insisted I find you, that I meet the person who acted with such integrity." Her eyes widened. "My father?" She realized he was talking about the elderly man she had helped. He was the father of this powerful figure sitting in front of her. Her small, unnoticed gesture had traveled further than she had ever imagined. And here she was, standing in front of the sun, in a world of wealth and influence she had never been part of. She felt a mixture of emotions: shock, disbelief, and a strange sense of pride. She never imagined that a simple act of kindness could reach someone in such a far-reaching way. And yet, here she was, recognized not for her accomplishments in her career, not for wealth or influence, but for being a good person when it mattered. The man gestured toward a chair, inviting her to sit. She hesitated, then accepted, feeling the weight of the moment and the gravity of the situation. She had been walking home earlier, feeling rejected and powerless, thinking that her life was at a low point. And now, within hours, she was here, in a place she had never imagined entering, speaking to someone who valued her character more than her background, more than her past accomplishments. He leaned forward slightly. "Life can be difficult, full of unexpected challenges. You faced one today. Losing a job can feel like losing everything, but sometimes it is a way for life to open new doors. We are offering you an opportunity, not because we feel pity, but because we believe in recognizing character, integrity, and kindness." She felt her chest tighten again. The thought of opportunity, of something beyond her struggles, made her mind spin. She had been lost in fear and uncertainty, walking home in despair, and now she was being offered a chance to step into something entirely new. The sheer unpredictability of life, the way it could turn in a single day, left her both amazed and cautious. She didn't want to be carried away too quickly, but she also felt the pull of possibility. The man spoke again, explaining the details of the offer. It was a position in one of the family's businesses, a role that would allow her to grow, learn, and contribute meaningfully. It wasn't a job handed out lightly, he emphasized. It was a role earned, a role suited for someone who had shown selflessness and judgment in situations that mattered. She listened carefully, absorbing each word, her mind trying to reconcile the disbelief and excitement she felt. She realized that the day, which had started with despair and loss, had transformed into something unimaginable. The streets she had walked earlier, full of fear and uncertainty, now seemed like the path that led her here. Each difficult moment, every step filled with doubt, had brought her to this point. And though the future was still unknown, she felt a sense of hope, fragile but real. She asked questions, wanting to understand more about the role, the expectations, and the responsibilities. The man answered patiently, without condescension, treating her with respect and dignity. It was unlike anything she had experienced in her previous job, where she had often felt invisible, undervalued, and replaceable. Here, she was not invisible. She was seen, appreciated, and sought after for who she was. As the conversation continued, she began to see a pattern, a realization that small acts matter more than she had ever believed. Her life had not been meaningless. Every choice, every gesture of care, every moment she had spent helping others, had contributed to this moment. It was a lesson in the unseen value of kindness, a lesson that life rewards character in ways that are often unexpected and profound. The man finally stood, signaling the end of the meeting, but also the beginning of something new. He extended his hand, and she shook it, feeling a mixture of gratitude, humility, and anticipation. She had been lost earlier in the day, unsure of her worth and place in the world. Now, she felt recognized, validated, and ready to take a step forward into a life that promised growth and new experiences. She left the office, guided back to the waiting cars, her mind still spinning from the surreal turn of events. The men were quiet, giving her space to process, but she felt a quiet bond with them, a sense that they had been part of a journey that she would never forget. The city outside, once dark and foreboding, now seemed alive with possibility, the streets no longer threatening but welcoming. As she rode back, she reflected on the day's events. The dismissal from the restaurant, the fear of walking home alone, the sudden encounter with powerful strangers, and the revelation of her impact. All had combined to create a turning point. She realized that life is unpredictable, full of unexpected twists, and that sometimes the smallest choices can have the largest consequences. She understood that integrity, kindness, and quiet courage could open doors she had never imagined, and that her life, though uncertain, was moving in a direction she could embrace with hope. By the time she returned home, the city lights twinkled in the distance, and a quiet calm settled over her. She felt a sense of closure for the day's earlier despair, replaced with anticipation for the future. She had been found, recognized, and valued in a way that transcended the ordinary, and though challenges would remain, she now carried with her the knowledge that her character mattered, that kindness had power, and that the unexpected could lead to remarkable opportunities. She stepped out of the sleek car and onto the polished stone pathway leading to the massive building. Her legs felt heavy, not from exhaustion, but from the weight of the situation. Everything about this place screamed wealth and power, and she couldn't help but feel like an outsider looking in. Every detail, from the manicured gardens to the glossy exterior of the building, reminded her that she had never been in a world like this before. And yet, despite the fear and awe, there was a spark of curiosity in her heart, a quiet hope that this encounter might mean something more than just confusion and uncertainty. The men who had found her earlier guided her through the grand entrance, past ornate decorations and impressive chandeliers, until they reached an elevator that would take them to the top floors. She felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. What awaited her above? She didn't know, but she knew it would be a pivotal moment in her life. The elevator ride was quiet except for the soft hum of the machinery, and she used the time to steady her thoughts, to breathe, and to prepare herself for whatever might come next. When the doors opened, they stepped into a spacious office filled with light and elegance. The man she had met earlier, the son of the elderly man she had helped, was waiting. His posture was relaxed, but there was a seriousness in his gaze that made her heart race. She realized that this meeting was not casual, that it had been planned carefully, and that her actions had earned her this rare attention. He greeted her with a warm smile, making her feel more at ease despite the grandeur surrounding her. "I wanted to meet you personally," he said. "Your actions did not go unnoticed. In a world where most people look out only for themselves, you stood out by showing genuine care for another human being. That is rare, and it deserves recognition." She felt a lump in her throat. She had never considered her small acts of kindness as noteworthy. They had always been part of who she was, something she did naturally, without expectation of reward or recognition. To hear that they had reached someone so far removed from her own world was overwhelming. She tried to respond, but words felt inadequate. "I only did what I could," she whispered. He nodded, understanding. "And that is why we are here. We believe in rewarding character, not just success or wealth. You have shown integrity, compassion, and courage, qualities that are rare and valuable. We want to offer you an opportunity, a position within our company, where your qualities can make a meaningful impact. She blinked, unable to believe what she was hearing. The weight of the day's earlier events, the dismissal from her job, the fear and uncertainty of walking home alone, suddenly felt distant compared to this new reality. She had been crushed by a sudden loss, yet now she was being offered a chance that could change the course of her life. Her mind struggled to keep up with the rapid shifts, trying to process the enormity of what was happening. He went on to explain the role in detail. It was not a job handed out lightly, nor a mere gesture of charity. It was a position that required responsibility, judgment, and the ability to interact with people from diverse backgrounds. She would be learning, growing, and contributing to projects that mattered. It was an opportunity that could redefine her career and her sense of self-worth. She listened intently, absorbing each detail, and felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. She asked questions, seeking clarity about expectations, responsibilities, and the kind of support she would receive. Each answer reassured her that she was being treated as a capable, valued individual, not a token of gratitude. The man emphasized that her personal qualities, her honesty, kindness, and integrity, were what had brought her here, and those qualities would continue to guide her success in this new role. As the conversation progressed, she realized that this offer was not just about employment. It was a chance for transformation, a way to step into a life where her actions could have far-reaching impact. She thought about her past struggles, the long hours at the restaurant, the small gestures that often went unnoticed. She understood that those moments had prepared her for this, that every act of care had built a foundation that led to this extraordinary opportunity. Her mind wandered to the man she had helped weeks ago. The thought that her simple act of kindness had reached someone so influential filled her with a sense of wonder. She had not expected her life to intersect with theirs in any meaningful way, yet here she was, standing on the threshold of a new beginning. The realization brought tears to her eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude and humility. The man observed her reaction and spoke gently. "We are not offering this lightly. We believe that people who act with integrity when no one is watching are the ones who can truly make a difference. You have shown that, and we want to give you a chance to use your qualities in a meaningful way." She felt a mix of emotions, relief, joy, and a lingering disbelief. It was hard to reconcile the hardships of the day with the promise of what lay ahead. She remembered walking home earlier, feeling rejected and uncertain, and now she was being recognized and valued in a way she had never imagined. The contrast was stark, almost surreal. He invited her to tour the office and meet some of the team she would be working with. As she walked through the spaces, she observed the energy, the collaboration, and the professionalism. She felt a sense of belonging that was new and invigorating. For the first time in a long while, she could envision herself growing, learning, and contributing in a meaningful way. The opportunity was not just about stability. It was about purpose, impact, and personal growth. Throughout the tour, she asked questions and received thoughtful answers. Each interaction reinforced the sense that she had been seen, understood, and valued for who she truly was. It was a stark contrast to her previous work environment, where her efforts had often been overlooked. Here, she felt recognized not for superficial achievements, but for her character and the choices she had made in everyday life. After the tour, she returned to the office for a final discussion. The man spoke about the importance of integrity, the value of empathy, and the impact one person could have when guided by genuine concern for others. He emphasized that the role would challenge her, but that it would also provide opportunities for growth, learning, and meaningful contributions. She listened, absorbing every word, and felt a growing sense of determination and excitement. As the meeting concluded, he extended a formal offer, inviting her to join the team. She accepted, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. The weight of uncertainty that had burdened her earlier in the day lifted, replaced by a sense of hope, purpose, and possibility. She realized that her life had taken a dramatic turn, and that she was stepping into a chapter filled with promise and potential. She left the office feeling a mix of exhilaration and reflection. The streets that had seemed intimidating earlier now felt alive with possibility. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from the quiet moments of kindness to the unexpected encounters that had reshaped her path. She understood that life could be unpredictable, but that integrity, empathy, and courage could open doors in ways she had never imagined. As she walked back to the car, she felt a quiet strength within her. She had faced uncertainty, fear, and disappointment, and yet she had emerged on the other side with an opportunity that could transform her life. The realization filled her with gratitude and resolve. She knew that challenges would come, but she also knew that she had the character, resilience, and determination to meet them. The ride home was quiet, giving her time to process the day's events. She reflected on the contrast between despair and opportunity, fear and hope, rejection and recognition. Each moment had led to this point, each choice and action building a foundation for the extraordinary circumstances she now found herself in. She understood that her life could change in unexpected ways, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could have the most profound impact. By the time she reached her neighborhood, the city lights twinkled gently in the night sky, and a sense of calm settled over her. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, a recognition of her own worth, and an anticipation for the journey ahead. She had been found valued, and offered a chance to grow in a way she had never imagined. The day's earlier hardships now seemed like stepping stones, preparing her for this moment, guiding her toward a future filled with opportunity, impact, and hope. The days that followed her meeting were filled with a mix of excitement, nervousness, and determination. She had returned to her apartment after that life-changing encounter with a sense of disbelief still lingering in her mind. Everything had shifted in such a short period of time, it was almost surreal. She had gone from being dismissed and walking home in despair to receiving an extraordinary opportunity that promised growth, recognition, and purpose. The contrast between those moments made her reflect on how unpredictable life could be and how her choices, no matter how small, had far-reaching consequences. She began her new role cautiously, learning the ropes and adjusting to an environment that was unlike anything she had experienced before. The office was bright and welcoming, but it also carried a seriousness that reminded her that she was stepping into a world of responsibility. She was assigned a mentor, a senior staff member who guided her through the processes, expectations, and projects she would handle. She listened intently, taking notes and asking questions, absorbing every bit of knowledge she could. She wanted to prove that the trust placed in her was not misplaced. The first weeks were challenging. She encountered situations that tested her judgment, patience, and decision-making. But she also discovered her own capacity to adapt, to learn quickly, and to connect with people from diverse backgrounds. She realized that her previous experiences, even the difficult ones at the restaurant, had prepared her for this. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to handle demanding situations, and to show empathy when needed were skills she had developed over years of quiet perseverance. Her colleagues soon noticed her dedication and reliability. Unlike her previous job, where she often felt invisible, here her contributions were acknowledged and appreciated. Meetings that once made her anxious became opportunities to share ideas, and she found herself growing in confidence with each passing day. She realized that being valued for who she was, rather than just what she could do, made a profound difference. It inspired her to push herself further, to take on new challenges, and to embrace the opportunities that came her way. One day, she received a message from the man who had first noticed her kindness, the powerful businessman whose father she had helped. He wanted to meet and discuss a new project that required someone with her specific qualities: empathy, integrity, and the ability to handle delicate situations with care. She felt honored and slightly nervous, but she knew this was another chance to make a difference. She met him at his office, and as always, he greeted her warmly, with respect and genuine interest in her perspective. They discussed the project in detail, and she offered her insights, drawing from her experiences and instincts. To her surprise, her ideas were valued and incorporated into the plans. She realized that her intuition, honed through years of observing and helping others, was an asset. She had never imagined that the simple skills she used in everyday life could hold such weight in a professional setting. The recognition was humbling, yet empowering, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Outside of work, her life began to change in small but meaningful ways. She noticed a lightness in her step as she walked home, a quiet confidence that replaced the fear and uncertainty she had felt before. Her friends and family saw the difference too, commenting on her brighter mood, her energy, and her optimism. She shared the story of her journey carefully, not to boast, but to illustrate the unexpected ways that kindness and integrity could shape life's outcomes. Each time she recounted it, she felt gratitude, not just for the opportunity she had received, but for the realization that her own actions mattered. Despite the success and recognition, she remained humble and grounded. She understood that the journey was ongoing and that life would continue to present challenges. But she also understood that she had the tools, the character, and the resilience to navigate them. Each day reinforced the lesson that small acts of care, even those unseen by most, could ripple outward and create extraordinary outcomes. She felt a deep sense of responsibility to continue acting with integrity, knowing that her choices could impact lives in ways she might never fully comprehend. As weeks turned into months, she became an integral part of her new team. She developed relationships built on trust and respect, and she saw the tangible results of her contributions. Projects that seemed daunting at first were completed successfully, and she gained a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She realized that this was not just a career change. It was a transformation of her entire perspective on life. She had moved from a place of uncertainty and fear to one of purpose and influence. She also made time to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. The day she had been dismissed from the restaurant, walking home alone in despair, now seemed like a pivotal moment rather than a setback. It had been a turning point, a catalyst that led her to opportunities she could not have imagined. She understood that moments of loss and fear were not the end, but sometimes the beginning of something greater. Her perspective shifted, and she began to see challenges not as obstacles, but as steps on a path toward growth and discovery. Her life became a balance of hard work, reflection, and mindful action. She embraced the responsibilities of her role with dedication, but she also remembered to act with kindness in all interactions. Whether mentoring a new colleague, assisting a team member, or making decisions that affected others, she carried the lessons of her past experiences with her. Each choice was guided by the integrity and empathy that had first drawn the attention of someone powerful and influential, and each success reinforced the value of staying true to herself. Over time, she found herself enjoying the work more than she had imagined. She relished the challenge of problem-solving, the satisfaction of contributing meaningfully, and the joy of making a positive impact. Her confidence grew steadily, and she realized that she was capable of far more than she had ever believed. The recognition and support she received fueled her motivation, but it was the understanding that her actions truly mattered that gave her the deepest sense of fulfillment. She also maintained a quiet gratitude for the man she had helped weeks ago, whose recognition of her character had sparked the chain of events that changed her life. She realized that the simple choice to act with compassion and integrity had led to unforeseen opportunities, shaping her path in ways she could never have predicted. The lesson stayed with her. Even the smallest gestures could have extraordinary consequences. As she continued to grow professionally and personally, she became a source of inspiration for others. Her story, though quiet and unassuming, demonstrated the power of kindness, integrity, and perseverance. She shared her experiences carefully, emphasizing the importance of acting with compassion and maintaining strong values, even when recognition seemed unlikely. She became a living example of how one person's actions could ripple outward, creating impact far beyond what was immediately visible. Months later, as she reflected on her journey, she realized that life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She had faced rejection, fear, and uncertainty, yet those moments had led to growth, opportunity, and recognition. She understood that her worth was not defined by setbacks or others' opinions, but by her character, her actions, and her dedication to doing what was right. She felt a sense of fulfillment, not just from her career success, but from the knowledge that she had remained true to herself and her values. The city streets she once walked with anxiety and uncertainty now seemed familiar and welcoming. She walked them with confidence and calm, aware that her journey had given her strength, perspective, and resilience. She carried herself differently, not out of pride, but out of a quiet understanding that her choices and actions had the power to shape her life and influence the world around her. She realized that life could change in an instant, that what seemed like an ending could become the beginning of something extraordinary. She understood that each day offered the possibility to act with integrity, kindness, and courage, and that those actions could have far-reaching effects. Her past struggles, the moments of fear and doubt, had all contributed to her growth and prepared her for the opportunities she now embraced. In the end, she felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. She had turned a moment of loss into a journey of growth and transformation. She had discovered that her actions, even the quiet and unnoticed ones, had value and impact. And she had learned that kindness, courage, and integrity were not just abstract ideals, but powerful tools that could open doors, change lives, and create a legacy of positive influence. Her life had shifted from uncertainty and fear to purpose, fulfillment, and hope. She had found recognition, growth, and the opportunity to make a difference. And as she continued forward, she carried with her the understanding that the true measure of a person was not in wealth, status, or accolades, but in the choices they made, the kindness they showed, and the courage with which they faced life's challenges. She walked forward with confidence, ready to embrace each new day, knowing that her journey, though unexpected, had led her to a place of meaning and possibility that she could truly call her own.